We're there.
We're online.
Lovely.
We're doing the thing. We're doing all this
Damn.
stuff. So,
Much noise.
yeah, lots of noise going through. Now, I've had a particular bad streak of listening to too much news podcasts. So I am very excited to not talk about coronavirus. Even though, I just said it.
But you're just.
Oh man, forget it. Well, no, let's acknowledge the fact that it's here. That when because in posterity our podcast will still do well because we try to not keep them to be timely. But you can go back and go, why are there so many episodes from Loose Cannon in the beginning of 2020? You'll go, oh yeah, it's the coronavirus time. Yeah.
I'd like to think this is just the start of lots of new, consistent, lots of episodes.
Yeah, we were getting the bug. Ha cha cha. So anyway, that's where you go. Yes, yes, yes.
It doesn't even deserve that.
No, it doesn't. Okay. So, Alex, what's our query today?
Yes. So, well, first of all,
There it is.
that was unintentional. First of all, I am Alex Lowe, and I. Well, what? What do you have to say now?
No, go ahead.
No, I'm Alex Lowe. That's Nick Oswald,
That's me. Hi.
and
We're
we are here.
Half of Loose Cannon here.
Yes, the cooler half.
Cooler heads will prevail, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So we are here for another episode of Duel of the Fates. Insert theme music that we don't really have.
Yeah, we didn't make theme music.
Oh no.
Oh well.
But back this week with, I say this week as if we're a weekly podcast now, or a weekly segment on the podcast, which isn't at all the case. But we do have a question this week that we were asked to address. That question comes in from fan, listener, super fan, dare we say, Yeong Kang, who wanted to know what is the proper order to watch the Star Wars movies in, especially if you're watching for the first time.
And if you've followed our Duel of the Fates series, which is this is only the second episode of that, Alex and I are going to take a position. I have a firm position this time. Last time I didn't. And I hope that you're not in this position.
I believe I'm not. Go ahead and state your position.
Here's the thing. We need to put some guardrails up, though, because I think we're in this shit, right? We're in the Star Wars stuff every day. We think about it, and if you're somebody who obsesses with Star Wars enough, like people who have podcasts, or maybe not people who have podcasts, but if you watch enough Star Wars, if you're getting involved with enough Star Wars paraphernalia, I think you should watch it however you want to watch it, because maybe this time you watch something in release order, and then sometimes you want to watch in chronological order, and sometimes you want to chop and screw it and do all these different things with it. And I think you should do that and pick and choose. Pick one movie, watch one thing. It's there's a lot of Star Wars, so you can't really necessarily pin it down. However, I think what we really want to convey, and more I'm reaching people and talking to people who haven't seen any Star Wars, as weird as that concept sounds. And I think the guardrails for this episode is, what's the proper viewing order for your first time?
Yes, that is what we are discussing.
Okay. And should we talk about what our positions are first and see if we need to move around?
Go ahead and state your firm position so then I can disagree.
If you are new to Star Wars, you should watch in chronological order.
And by chronological order,
start with episode 1. And let's say no TV for this. This is just films. This is just feature-length films. And when we say chronological order, we say in the order in which events take place in universe, as opposed to release order, which is the order in which they released in the theater. So 1977 to now.
Yeah. Now, let's clarify. When I had this question in mind, I was only thinking the 9 trilogy films. Are you talking all 11 or just the 9?
I think yes, Solo and Rogue One should be in there.
Okay.
Yep.
And those fall in the chronological order as well?
Chron or release, right?
Yeah,
because they shuffle up a little bit. If you're in Chron order, then yes, definitely watch them in Chron order.
All right. Yeah. I am a release order kind of guy.
Thank God. I'm glad, because we'll actually have a Corey here.
Yeah. So, present your case. Why Chron order?
Okay. And it hinges on one fact and one fact alone. And maybe this will kind of run out of steam once we get to the sequel era and the Disney era. But the one fact and one fact alone is that Darth Sidious makes no sense if you know who he is already. And I suppose if you're showing this episode to Ye Young, this spoilers, right? But this, for some reason, and for some godforsaken reason, in 1999, when the prequels came out for the first one, meaning Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, they kind of took the narrative aspect for that you might not know that Darth Sidious and Emperor Palpatine, or in that case, Chancellor Palpatine or Senator Palpatine, are the same person. And to me, when you watch that movie, it's like it's obvious, right? But also, it makes callbacks to the fact that you know who Palpatine is as a person. And I've heard from more than once that it's really confusing that you're meant to believe these are separate people if you've seen the first movies first. So I'm saying if you've seen the original 1977 through 1983 run of movies, it's confusing to you that they're not trying to hide that. Or, I'm sorry, that they're trying to hide his identity to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I don't find it confusing, and I don't know necessarily that they're trying to hide it. I think it's a great reveal in the same way that it's like you kind of know Anakin ends up being Vader. Spoilers.
They show that in the poster, right? He has the outline of Darth Vader. And I think,
yeah, but it's still like a cool reveal.
But you can't hide Darth Vader from, I think, the public consciousness. I think because like Luke, I am your father, which is obviously the wrong one, but that's the one that sort of met our public consciousness for the mythology of our lives, right? Since the 80s, it's been our Homer's Odyssey. And I think you can't hide that fact. Like, you just know who Vader is just by... It's like, since the Chernobyl disaster, everybody has some kind of radioactive isotope in them, right? Because you can now date things from before or after the Chernobyl disaster. You can date your consciousness since before or after 1977.
I think that's the appropriate analogy for Star Wars.
Exactly, Chernobyl disaster. And I think if you're coming to Star Wars having no knowledge, or maybe just enough of what you've gained through osmosis, like I just mentioned, you have a very privileged and lucky position because you can start blank and you can watch those movies and go, who the hell is this guy? And the unfolding of the prequels might be a little bit more surprising to you and might kind of reveal themselves in a much different way than as if you came in having already watched the sequels, which that's release order.
Osmosis Jones a Star Wars movie?
No.
Where do you put that in the Chron order?
Yeah, that's you watched that in 1998 or something like that. I don't know.
Was that a DreamWorks? That's a real deep dive. Yeah.
Is that a DreamWorks like copy of a Pixar movie? I can't remember.
I don't know. As our audience skews younger and younger, I think less people will get that reference.
Right.
But yeah, I think the whole coming in with no knowledge is key, because if someone was able to come in with absolutely zero knowledge, then 100% watch it in Chron order. That's okay. Great.
But no, I guess that wasn't a guardrail, or was that a guardrail that I set up?
No, you said someone's coming in seeing it for the first time.
Okay.
And when I say no knowledge,
yeah, okay.
I'm saying they don't have knowledge that Darth Vader is a thing, which no one is coming into Star Wars not having knowledge that Darth Vader is a thing. So that's why I think release order is so much better. Think about Batman Begins. When Batman Begins came out, it was so cool because we knew who Batman was. That would be a weird-ass movie if you had no idea who Batman is.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, that's one of those questions.
I don't have a good rebuttal to you saying I don't know.
Well, that begs the question again. How much do you know about Batman? How much do you know about Star Wars, having not watched any Star Wars and only seen media around it? And I want to say, and here's the thing about Palpatine, and this hinges on Palpatine, because I think it doesn't hinge on Darth Vader, even though this story is about Anakin Skywalker. Really, it's his arc from becoming Anakin Skywalker to Darth Vader. And I think you will, just by fact of being alive in this time and consuming media, that will seep into your pores, so to speak. But I don't think the Emperor parts do. Yeah, osmosis. I don't think the Emperor parts do, unless you're super into Reddit and you see the prequel memes, because of course prequel memes kind of are all throughout the internet. They're the coronavirus of the internet, so to speak. And I think you might not really know the arc of Emperor Palpatine if you don't watch the films.
That's fair. I don't care about the Emperor. That's not an important part of the story to me. I get that he's the big through line and whatever, but I'm not invested in anything about the Emperor ever.
Sure, even though he's the entire 9-film arc of this series, as we come to find out from the Rise of Skywalker. So you kind of should care about him. In other words,
but I don't.
That's a good point. It's a point. It's like, are you meant to care about it, or do you actually care about it? And did they do a good job of making you care about it? Those are two separate questions.
Yeah, he is more of a plot device to me than something I actually care about the arc of. So, let me give you my reason, and it doesn't take in the Emperor's plot at all. My reason why someone who's watching for the first time should watch in release order is because I think it's jarring for someone, especially someone who's younger and hasn't watched a lot of movies that were made before the 90s, to go from watching the prequels, which have good CGI and good effects, all things considered, and they're used to the Marvel Cinematic Universe or whatever else now that has that, and then to go back to the films from the 70s, where it feels like a step back in terms of not the movies. Obviously, the quality of the story is better, but the quality of the production seems like a step back. And I think that can be jarring in a way that it's going to take away from the story for people, and they're going to have trouble adjusting and fully appreciating the original trilogy.
Because the ships are going to be dirtier?
Yeah, well, and just it looks less real.
Okay. Define real.
And I think, well, like the real spaceships we all know and love, and the real Gungans and things like that.
Yeah, and I suppose, and this is something that some of my other passions are coming into it. The left-wing podcast Chapo Trap House are currently going into a series where they deep dive the prequels, and their preface is that it's really bizarre work. It's a bizarre work of pure unbridled creativity, because it's George Lucas having unlimited funds and getting to do whatever he wants, and nobody can say no to him, and that brought about some insanity in the prequels, and I think. That's for one thing. He had way more tools in his disposal starting in the mid to late 90s. In fact, he was inspired by the fact that Jurassic Park could bring dinosaurs to life. So he's like, oh, I can do Star Wars now. I can do a way better Star Wars now that you can make dinosaurs. And I think having the tools at his disposal, CGI at the time, which was not that great, not very sophisticated as it is now. Not as sophisticated as it is certainly for Disney time. But there is something to be said about how much polish and what's the word I'm looking for? Pomp, I guess, that the prequels have, that just completely bottoms out if you were to watch episode 4 after episode 3.
Yep. And so that's where the listener who brought this question up to me a few weeks ago before she was starting to watch, I waffled a little bit on what to say, and I ended up going with Chron order, and she did mention these things about it being jarring coming back, and that got me rethinking the whole way I stand. Now, let me say, unrelated to all of that, the personal order I watch it in is I watch it in scene order. So what I do is now that I have all the Blu-rays and it's easy, I watch scene 1 of every single film, 1 through 9, scene 2 of every single film, 1 through 9, all the way to the end.
That's a lot of work.
It's worth it though.
Too bad they don't have a Blu-ray disc changer for you,
like those cool old stereos, yeah.
I had one. Mm-hmm. Did your family have one of those?
Yeah, of course.
We had a 5-disc changer and we thought we were pretty fancy.
I've never had a car with a multi-CD changer though.
Have you ever seen somebody's car where you had to go load them in the trunk?
Oh, no.
So that used to be a thing. If it was like my parents have had cars where it was a 6-disc changer, and it was almost like an 8-track that you slid out little panels to put the CDs into, and then you could still put it in the console in the dashboard of your car. But there was ones that were like 20-disc changers, but you had to go do it in the trunk.
In the trunk?
Yeah.
Gosh, that just It's like taking Chinese fire drills to a new level.
Anyone remember CDs? Yeah, I don't.
But all right, so that was my slight joke for this episode and tangent.
Anyway,
back to the order. That's my reason. My reason has nothing to do plotting wise, other than I do think it's cool to see the backstory of someone, and I think the reveal of Anakin turning is made way cooler by the fact it's an inevitability. Like seeing him go from a sweet little kid who's asking Natalie Portman if she's an angel to becoming what he becomes. I think that's a cool arc when you know what's going to happen, as opposed to if you don't know what's going to happen, Anakin just seems like a dick.
And that's where my argument comes in, where I think unless you were in a Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt situation where you've lived in a bunker for 30 years, I think you probably just know that by virtue of consuming any other media. So you can still have that experience. But then some of the other bells and whistles that come along with Star Wars can unfold themselves.
Yeah. I don't want to be too copacetic, is that the word, in our arguments. We do need to disagree on some things, but I think we can both agree that there's no wrong way to watch Star Wars.
Sure. Just watch it. that makes this a moot point for even arguing, right? I agree. Watch it how you want to watch it, but I think are we arguing for the best first time experience then?
Yeah, we're arguing for the best first time experience.
Okay. In that case, then I think you should watch it in Chron order. If you have the privilege of not knowing any Star Wars other than the fact that stuff that you can glean from other work, then watch it in Chron order, because I will have never. And think about this. Think about you yourself. Think about anyone who was born before 1994, right? I'm guessing, because that means you had if you were born in 94, you have a standing chance of A, seeing Star Wars on in the background, and B, remembering some of it, because you were 5 years old when the prequel started. So you could sort of have a memory. I'd say, like, if you were born before 1994, you don't have the privilege of not knowing. Right? You don't have that privilege of stepping into this series, and we're going to find this out because Star Wars is over 40 years old. I think it's the 40th anniversary of Empire Strikes Back, so now we're starting to do those. We're going to get into a territory with the Skywalker saga being over, that there are going to be children born a couple of years ago that can have their pick for how they unfold Star Wars in their lives. And I think if you have that privileged position that I didn't have, you narrowly made that, right? But I think if you can have the chance to watch it without knowing what happens specifically in the original trilogy, then you should take it.
Check your privilege, youngins.
Yeah, seriously, you guys. The world is your oyster right now, other than the fact that there are no jobs. So, like, you can go and pick out the Star Wars that you want and get it in the order that you want and be surprised by things.
My buddy's kids are 3 and 5, and they love Star Wars. And it's really weird to think about the way it's really going to unfold for them, because, like, they probably have a better knowledge of Baby Yoda than Yoda at this point.
Right. And think about, a generation is 20 years, right? So it's not necessarily that you're going to say this next generation views it the next one. I think kids in the 2010s are going to be way different than kids in the 2020s. Because kids in the 2010s I could actually understand because they're watching Clone Wars. And I think Clone Wars can inform your Star Wars very adequately. But now, Clone Wars isn't done. Of course, at the time of this recording, it's still happening because they're doing the last season. But like, I think in the 2020s, I'm having a tough time understanding how new kids, like you said, 3 to 5 year olds, 6-year-olds, very impressionable youths, how are they going to take in Star Wars? It's a question. It's a mystery to me.
I also love that the whole premise of this podcast episode is how you should watch best viewing experience when you've never seen Star Wars, and we have to acknowledge the fact that it would be the weirdest thing of all time for someone to be listening to a Star Wars podcast about that with having no prior knowledge of Star Wars.
Well, this would make no sense. It's just like watching, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and not knowing who Sharon Tate is or Charles Manson.
Yeah, but people have done that. I don't think there's too many people listening to episode 67 of Loose Cannon with no knowledge of Star Wars.
Is this episode 66?
No. Episode 66 was our last one that was released, I believe. That was our the one we just recorded. This will be released as 67. We're talking in the past, the future.
We're future pasting this. Yeah, future perfect.
Yep. So I'm not budging for my thing. I think the youths would appreciate it more if they start 4, 5, 6.
So I'm gonna throw my Hegelian dialectic at you here. So we have thesis, antithesis, and then we're gonna do synthesis. So I personally think if you have the privileged position to not have seen Star Wars, start in Chron order, because you will get an experience that none of us have had, especially your elders. Your elders didn't get to have that, so you should pounce on that.
Well, wait. If that's your theory, then they should watch like 8, 9, 1, 6, 3.
No, 8. Sorry, the Disney.
That's
the
an
Disney
experience
trilogy
we didn't have.
The Disney trilogy makes zero sense if you haven't seen any Star Wars, because that is
entirely makes zero sense.
It tugs on your Star Wars strings, and they have to have been there. Otherwise, that's another thing. Like I said, I don't understand how kids in the 2020s are going to take in Star Wars, because if they take in Disney Star Wars first, to me, that makes no sense.
You can have reverse strings.
Sure, that's string theory, whatever. But anyway, I'm going to get to my synthesis, right? Because I think you're the thesis. I think most purists and most people with their heads screwed on correctly say Chron order, and I think I'm a little weird, to be honest, to say. No, sorry, you said release order. I think I'm weird saying Chron order, but let's get together. Let's synthesize. And there's one order we haven't talked about.
Yeah.
The machete order.
Super anti.
You're anti that. Well, but this gets into what if you know what happens to Darth Vader, and then you get to watch him as a child and understand, when he's saying all that angel stuff to Natalie Portman, understanding that he's going to go south real quick. It's even better if you could start with, and machete order is here. Let me explain this. Machete order is A New Hope, 1977, Empire Strikes Back, 1980. Then you watch all of the prequels, because then you learn that Darth Vader is, spoiler alert, Luke's father, and you go, oh, okay, so how did he end up this way? And then you watch. So when I did a movie marathon before The Force Awakens came out, that's how I watched it. I watched 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 6, and then you see. Honestly, and this leaves for some great emotional development, because watching Return of the Jedi, having just watched the prequels, or in our case, having it in our consciousness more recently, it gives way more emotional gravitas to the sacrifice that Darth Vader makes at the end to save his son. It's way more emotional to me as an adult than I was as a kid, having known the prequels.
I'm against it. That reads like when you're watching a movie and then the character has a flashback and the sky gets all wavy. And
in this
it's
case,
like,
it's a 4.5 hour flashback. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm anti-machete. Well, no, I love Machete, the movie. I'm anti machete order for Star Wars. I will say, when I was researching into this, just about every website that's ever existed has a post about this question, but my favorite one was Men's Health felt the need to do a post that says, how do you watch the Star Wars movies in release order? And then their post is how to watch the movies in release order. So it's, this movie was released first, this movie was released second, all the way through. And they probably got hundreds of thousands of clicks on that.
Yeah. Let's think of one thing that we haven't really explored, is like how Chron and release order changes the Disney Star Wars movies. Because if you watch in Chron, you go 1, 2, 3, Solo, Rogue One, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If you watch in release order, you go 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, Rogue One, 8, Solo, 9. Those are very different.
I think Chron order screws Han Solo. I think seeing Solo as your first view of Han Solo
absolutely
makes him way less cool of a character.
Agree.
And I didn't even think of that before you brought that up, because I was just thinking about the 9 trilogy films.
And if we're being hard and fast about, like, all right, whatever rule that you give yourself to watch these, you have to follow it through all the way to the end, to episode 9 in 2019. You're right. Solo makes 0 sense as the 4th movie that you're going to watch.
Yep. And then when we're going Chron order, where does Steve Palpatine take place?
Steve, A Star Wars Story?
Yeah, is that like before episode 1?
Oh yeah, that's definitely a prequel to the prequels. That's like some Darth Plagueis stuff, you know.
So that changes everything. But yeah, I think Han would be the big loser on Chron order. I'm trying to think if there would be a big winner of that, other than like you think of the Emperor.
To be honest, it doesn't affect Rogue One. I think viewing Rogue One right before A New Hope is still kind of cool.
Yeah.
It doesn't inform your view of the main characters at all, but it kind of just like, it sort of sets the stakes higher. Mm-hmm. I think that's one thing that A New Hope kind of suffers from being on its own, because it was a movie on its own originally. There's no plans to make any any sequels to it. It's sort of, the stakes don't seem as high because that universe seems tiny, because you only really see like 20 people in that movie, as opposed to if the world opens up to you and you see Rogue One and all of the village people, all of the villagers on Jeddah die, and all this stuff on, they're willing to sacrifice their own people on Scarif. Like, that sets the stakes a little bit higher. As opposed to when I was a kid watching A New Hope, when they destroyed Alderaan, I didn't go, oh, wow.
Yeah.
It was more like, okay. It seems like a villain thing to do. But like, and that was one of the arguments. There's a series on YouTube called How to Make the Prequels Better, or What If the Prequels Were Good? And one of their things was, instead of Naboo, it's Alderaan. So you can have all of the same things that happen on Naboo, but that's Alderaan instead. Because then you have an emotional attachment to it, and if you go back and watch A New Hope, then you're like, oh, you just destroyed the thing we watched for 3 films.
Yeah, I feel you on that. I hadn't thought about that.
Yep.
Well, we're getting near time.
Yep.
So, I think this is a good one for people to get back at us with their thoughts. Reach out on social media. Let us know which one of us is right, which one of us is a complete idiot, which one of us wants to ruin the tale of Anakin.
Yeah. I don't think anyone won in this one, to be honest.
Well, I feel like we would have to be pretty soft in our own opinion here to think the other one won. This isn't the first time we've thought about this.
No. This is what Duel of the Fates should be. I think at the end,
you did not sway me.
Yeah, I think the Duel of the Fates should be we've dug in harder at the end, or one of us has just been overwhelmed.
I have not been overwhelmed, and in fact, I no longer like you, Nick.
Yep, because the other one, our Feige versus Epstein one, I think we both came at it with the same aspect. So none of us were overwhelmed. Yeah. We just kind of like, this is the guy. But this one, like, I don't feel strongly about it to where I say you're absolutely wrong. I will not let my kids watch it and introduce it to their kids. And in what way, in what order? I wouldn't hate it if they did release.
Social experiment on your own children. I like it. That's the main reason to reproduce. All right, Nick, run through the socials so people can get at us and tell
Oh
us.
yeah,
Right.
should have done this in the front matter, but we're doing a little, I guess, campaign to get people to follow us on Twitch because things happen if you get 50 followers, and I think we want to do more and more streaming content in general, especially because we're stuck inside. Whether that be tabletop gaming, which I have some plans to do, or real actual video gaming like Hot Boy Chris did over this weekend. And so please, if you haven't already, go to twitch.tv/Star Wars LC. If you're not a Twitch person, just make an account and follow us, and then just never log in again. Just do it. But it's the same username as our Twitter. So again, twitch.tv/Star Wars LC. Go follow us there. Hit us on the Twitter at the same place, Star Wars LC. Same thing on Instagram, and then on Facebook, we're Star Wars Loose Cannon. All perfectly fine places to get at us and ask us questions and give us topics for more Duel of the Fates.
Yeah, we're going to keep doing these. They won't always be me versus Nick, but I suspect a lot of them will be. So please send in those questions. And I guess if you have specific Canon Boys that you want to answer your question, you can request that when you send it in. But we're going to keep bringing you a lot of content during this time when you may not be able to well, I guess you can frolic in meadows, but while you may not be able to go out to bars or whatever,
talk to people, man.
Yeah,
give us a good review on Apple Podcasts as well as Stitcher. Those are our two main places. And then just tell your Star Wars loving friends about us. We'd love to have them involved and answer their questions. And also, one big thing that we got going on is another series. We're doing our regular episodes where we do kind of a how stuff works type thing. But we have another series that we're about to drop probably sooner than this episode, so you've probably already heard it. But another episode we got coming out is What If They Made a Star War, in which we just did Coen Brothers. And it was pretty interesting.
We've already dropped one of those episodes, Nick.
Well, yeah, right? But if this is your first, if you're just getting introduced to us now, you got some back catalog to look up. Hi, Annalie. Sorry you missed this too. It's okay. It's Twitch. People have lives. No, do people have lives? People don't have lives anymore.
Not in this time.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know why we don't have like thousands of people viewing right now.
Yeah, well, to be honest, and since we're like getting more serious about quote unquote Twitch, whatever quote unquote serious, we've had more people on these streams than ever, even if it is just a trickle. So, yeah, I
like a good trickle.
I like a good trickle.
Hopefully, we trickled your fancy today.
Yes. All right, so we'll call it a day. Heading off. Nick and Alex signing off.
Stopped recording.